from the academic to the view of the hacks. Carrie Gracie has a couple of them with them down at Westminster.
I'm going to test you on the single transferable vote shortly, just to check that you were listening to Emma properly. But first, though, let's tackle some strategic questions for the big parties, because with me now, Sonia Sodha from The Observer and Stefanie, Bolzen, UK correspondent for German newspaper Die Welt. Thank you both for coming up onto this balcony. Sonia, you first. We've heard from some of the Tory contenders for leadership. Boris Johnson crushing rebuke, he called the vote last night. Jeremy Hunt saying it's an existential question now. What do you think they're going to be considering as they make their pitches?
Well, I think for both main parties, it was a very defeating night. I think for the Conservatives, they're going to be really worried about the rise of the Brexit party. We've already seen some of the leadership contenders tack right in recent weeks, so talking up the prospect of no deal. Even somebody who voted Remain, like Jeremy Hunt, has been talking about, maybe we could go for no deal. So I think that in the Conservative Party leadership contest, we're going to see the party tap right. I think Labour equally faces huge strategic issues. I think Labour was hoping to come second very much to the Brexit party. Instead, it was pushed into third place by the Lib Dems by quite a significant margin, actually. I think what that really shows is that Labour's strategy of prevaricating, trying to be all things to all voters, saying to some voters we're a party of soft Brexit, trying to appear like they back a referendum to other voters, just isn't working. Actually, voters on all sides seem to kind of reject Labour, I suppose, in quite significant numbers. So for both big parties, there are big strategic challenges, I think, ahead.
Stephanie, your take on this?
Well, it is, in a way, you could say nothing has changed. So if you, obviously, I see this more from a European, German, Brussels perspective, and people on the continent will look at this, politicians, governments will see that basically the countries are split as it was before. You have on the one hand the Brexit party, then you have actually, if you put all the votes for the pro-Remain parties together, it's even a higher number than the Brexit party. So they will look at this and think, what is the outcome of this? So I heard someone saying to me this morning in Brussels, abwarten und Tee trinken, which means just let's wait and have a cup of tea.
Although, do they really have time to drink their tea? Because this is all coming down the road quite fast in October. Yeah. They're going to be put on the spot over whether they're prepared to reopen the negotiation or otherwise see a no-deal Brexit. As Sonia's explained, the next leader of the Conservative Party, the next Prime Minister, may well have to take that position.
Yeah, that's true. But on the other hand, they're also looking at the House of Commons, and they have seen twice the vote that was in contra of leaving the European Union without a deal. So they will be thinking, well, if this really comes to that situation that they have to vote about this, they might reject it. And what happens next? So that Prime Minister might then say, well, either a general election or a second referendum. And the European Union or the Commission has said all the way along that if that is the case, they will extend Article 50.
So while they're drinking tea in Europe, Sonia, back to this question of whether Parliament can overturn a headlong drive towards a no deal. Do you think there are enough Tory soft Brexiteers to actually make the enormous kind of existential decision to vote against their own government?
Well, I think the challenge for Parliament going forward is that they're running out of parliamentary devices to stop a no deal. So we had the Institute for Government, which are experts on this, produce a paper last week that said really there's one fail-safe route to block a no deal, and it's quite a nuclear option. It's a vote of no confidence in the government. So I think there are already a number of Tory rebels who've made themselves known. So people like Dominic Grieve, for example, perhaps even Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, saying they would do something quite serious if they had to stop a no-deal Brexit. So I think there is a chance that we could see Parliament, if it looked really certain that a Prime Minister, Boris Johnson or Dominic Raab, was gunning out to take the country out on the 31st of October with catastrophically crashing out without a deal. There is a chance that some Tory rebels could come together with Labour to vote no confidence in the government. But that still creates a huge amount of uncertainty about what's next, and I think that's why Labour's position in this is so important. Huge pressure on Jeremy Corbyn today to stop his prevaricating and come firmly around to the position of a referendum.
Sonia, I'm just going to interrupt you there because we're just hearing that Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary, has just announced his own candidacy for leadership of the Conservative Party and next Prime Minister, as you can see his tweet there. And Sonia, just pick up with that. He's entering what is already quite a crowded field.
Absolutely, and I think the next few weeks, I mean, there's such a sort of paradox here, really, isn't there? Which is the country is facing this huge question. Time is ticking down to October the 31st, and we've got the Tory party sort of engulfed in a beauty leadership parade, huge numbers of candidates. It's not actually that clear what the differences are between them. You've got lots of candidates taking very similar stances around things, for example, like, being more gung-ho about a no deal. So I think it's going to be quite a damaging few weeks for the country. All focus is going to be on these sort of Tory leadership candidates trying to out-compete each other and trying to be more like Nigel Farage than the next one. Whereas actually the real work around how we're going to get out of this Brexit impasse just isn't going to get done.
And Stefanie, just very, very quickly on the Europeans, once they finish drinking tea, watching all these machinations in London and around the UK, there are going to be decisions for them. How do you see the outcome of the EU elections on the continent affecting the willingness to negotiate of certain parties? I think I'm thinking about the departure of Merkel. I'm thinking about the relative poor performance for Emmanuel Macron's party.
Yeah, you're right. But on the other hand, what I can't see is that they would suddenly now turn around and say, okay, actually we have said we're not going to open the withdrawal agreement and suddenly going to do this, because they have now actually won against the populists this election, and they wouldn't now suddenly turn around and prove the opposite.
Stefanie and Sonia, thank you very much for joining me up here. We'll talk to you again later.